All right, we're going to be going over what I think that organizations can learn from the Equifax data breach. So to start off, we're going to be looking at the NIST cybersecurity framework. Now, there's 5 phases in this framework, but we're going to be going over the identify and the protect phases in particular. So this leads us to the identify phase. So what's the purpose of the identify phase? Well, as the name suggests, the purpose of this phase is to help organizations identify what they need to protect. And there are some great questions that organizations can ask themselves in order to help them identify what they need to protect. So here are some great questions that organizations can ask themselves to help them identify what they need to protect. So one of the great questions would be, what business are they in? What sector? Are they in the tech industry? Are they industrial? Or are they in the entertainment sector? Another great question would be, where does this organization stand in this particular sector? Are they near the top of the food chain? Are they a really big company or organization, or are they kind of in the middle or at the bottom? And another question would be, what do they need to keep operating? What's essential for their ability to do business? And what are attackers going to come after? What valuable assets do they hold that attackers are going to come after? So now let's look at the identify phase in relation to the Equifax data breach. And we can answer some of these questions that we just asked ourselves on the previous slide. The most important asset for Equifax is their customers' PII, their personally identifiable information. That's something that they absolutely need to protect, and that's something that they obviously failed at. And what kind of business is Equifax? Well, Equifax is a credit bureau, so that's what sector that they fall under. And Equifax is a huge organization. They're really large, and they hold a lot of personally identifiable information, and they're near the top of the food chain. And that personally identifiable information is what attackers are going to be coming after. So this leads us into the protect phase. And as the name suggests, the purpose of the protect phase is to protect the organization's assets. And so how do we do that? Well, organizations need to start thinking like attackers. They need to think, okay, what are some popular attack techniques of cyber criminals towards organizations like ours, or in general? And so, as we see in a lot of cyber attacks, one of cyber criminals' favorite techniques is an attack called a privileged escalation attack. And we can see this with the Equifax data breach. Yes, the attackers leveraged a unpatched vulnerability in a web application that Equifax used, but from there they were able to discover these privileged accounts, which allowed them to do the damage that they were able to do. And here are some important facts about privileged accounts. Privileged accounts are high value targets for attackers. No matter what industry that you're in, attackers are going to be going after privileged accounts. And that's just a fact. And the reason why is because privileged accounts have a lot of power. Attackers can really cause a lot of damage if they get a hold of privileged accounts. If they escalate their privileges and they get to an admin or privileged account. So when we look at the privileged accounts role in the Equifax data breach, the attackers were able to find passwords that were stored in a plain text file to these privileged accounts. So from there, they found everything that they needed. They struck gold. They discovered all the power that they need to carry out their attack on Equifax. Now, there are several ways that organizations can protect against these privileged isolation attacks, and these are things that Equifax should have done. First off, we have encrypt passwords. Now, when we go back, as I just said, the attackers found a list of root and admin passwords in a file stored in plain text. And this should never happen. Passwords of any kind should never be stored in plain text. That should always be encrypted. And this helps slow down attackers and makes it more difficult for them to achieve their goals. Another way that Equifax could have prevented this attack would be using something called multi-factor authentication, or MFA. So MFA is something that, again, makes it more difficult for attackers to abuse privileged accounts. So multi-factor authentication is really useful in securing these passwords. So multi-factor authentication looks like things like biometrics, text codes, email codes, and even security questions. So this means if an attacker is able to get a hold of a password, they're not automatically in. They still have to get past the multi-factor authentication, which is really hard sometimes. And then finally, what I think one of the most important things about protecting privileged accounts, or accounts in general, is just least privilege. Least privilege means that these user accounts only have the necessary power that they need to carry out their task and nothing more. To put this in perspective, if privileged accounts had the power to change, delete, export data of any kind, no matter what, with any limitations, all it would take would be one privileged account to be compromised and an organization would go completely under. Privilege, least privilege, helps separate these things. It makes it harder for attackers to completely destroy an organization. So let's say if an attacker gets a hold of a privileged account that has to do with accounting, they'll be able to have a lot of power in that area, but they won't be able to affect anything else. They may affect some things indirectly from that account, but they won't be able to get building something like building schematics or things like that. So to summarize these lessons learned, organizations really need to understand the importance of identifying where they stand, what kind of sector are they in, and because of that, what do they need to protect? What area of their systems do they need to put more security in, or a little less? And they also need to learn how to protect those properly, what that looks like, not just throwing out random security measures and hoping it works. So there needs to be a structured approach to how they protect these valuable assets. All right, so that was my report on, or my key takeaways on the lessons that organizations can learn from the Equifax Data Breach. Here are my references if you want to go check them out. And thank you for watching.